Alright guys, I am now about to finally install the Göldo Backbox. This says black box. Sometimes it's called black box, sometimes it's called Backbox. This is what it looks like by Rockinger. And I got this off eBay. There's a guy on there that sells them from eBay because these come from Germany and they're kind of hard to get to otherwise. So hopefully this won't take a long time at all. I'm having to actually pull instructions up via online because apparently the instructions are in German. So can't really do anything about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Very, very small apparatus here that goes in the back of your guitar. It's supposed to help keep your guitar in like a zero type of position and keep it flush so that there is a lot better tuning stability. It's a lot easier to install than a trim setter, and this guy recommends this as the last word in tremolo stabilization. And if you look those words up, the last word in tremolo stabilization, you can find that article on this Göldo Backbox. Okay, so what we're going to have to do first of all is with my Ibanez RG4EX1, I'm going to have to take the go ahead and take the tremolo arm out, and we're going to go ahead and flip this thing over because what I need to do is I've got to get my springs aligned just right here. And since I've already fit this up with Velcro, you can pull this right off. Comes right off there. Signed by Steve I. Awesome. And as you can see, my springs, to try to help my tremolo stability, when I first got this, I tried to put these two springs together. But later on, I found out that because of this spring is tighter, these are actually weaker. I figured that if I put them in a closer fulcrum point, they would stay in better tune. But that apparently doesn't work that way. But it's been working fine for me, and I've had no problems. But now we're going to install this bad boy. It has to be installed in the center, so what I'm going to have to do is move these over and to the outer springs, and then move this one over probably on the bass side because the strings are thicker on that side. So I'm probably going to want the two strings to be above there. So what I'm going to do is you might be able to see that you have to unscrew these screws here to get that to work. So I'm just going to do this real quick. Once that plate comes out, what I'll need to do is put this arm back in, because what I want to do is take and bend this just like this on this side so that I can in fact loosen this up and remove those springs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to put something to block that off. I've got a knife here, and that might work as a pretty good block so that I can actually loosen these springs. If I let go, it's stuck there. So that's good. That's what I want to happen. So that's blocked off. So what I'm going to do is take that and go ahead and try to undo the springs here and try to not let that happen. So take that and go ahead and try to undo the springs here. So now what we need to do is, like I said, we're going to put it in this first hole here. Alright, so we're going to stick it in here. We're going to move this to the outer edge, okay? And it's going to be pretty hard to get that over there, so what I'm going to have to do is get a screwdriver or something to move that over. And I've got some wire grips down here. I'll just use those instead. I'm having to work around the camera to do this, so okay, so I'm going to pause this and then I'm going to bring it back up so that you can see what's going on here. Alright, so now as you can see, we now have plenty of room for the back box to be right about here somewhere. So let me locate where I've placed the back box here now. Okay, I found that. So that's going to go right about back here somewhere, okay? That's going to hold this in place. We're going to try to put it right in the very center so that this will brace where that goes. And luckily, I mean, this barely fits. Luckily, this is made in such a way where this is hopefully going to work. You can see there's a little bit of a rise here okay? Luckily, this is the right exact length. Let's see if I can try this from the other side here. This is the exact length to where it fits in there pretty perfect. Just a little bit of movement. So we're going to screw it to where it needs to be. Right now it's not where it needs to be though, because I've got it blocked off. So I'm going to take the block tremolo arm and loosen that knife just like that. Let that tremolo block come back to where it was. Should be the same because I haven't changed the spring tension whatsoever. It should be about the same here. And I'm finding out that it's not for some reason. Somehow, see this? This one has slipped up too far. So that's why I have a very loose string here. Now everything's out of tune. And I've got to loosen that. I've got to put this back. Somehow that slipped out, so I've got to put that back to where it needs to be. But I don't think that'll be much of a big deal. So right now I'm going to work on that. I'm going to pause this, and we'll come back to hopefully install this very soon. Alright guys, turn this fan on over here. It's getting a little hot in the workbench area here. Everything is now in tune. Everything is now set up. Took me about, I guess, a good 20-25 minutes to do that. But everything is in tune now. I want it to be in tune when I start, so that when I set this back box, that it's going to be, the tuning is going to be accurate. And so I'm just using my smartphone here, and the name of this website, I'll leave a link below to this guy's website on the instructions, his preferred method of instructions. So if you want to know how to install this back box, look at the links below this video on YouTube, and I'll give you the links to that. But I'm going over some of these. The second instruction talks about adjusting the knob a certain way. But anyway, this knob adjusts this long pole, this actual pusher here. This knob adjusts the tension spring, okay? What he suggests is the second instruction on these instructions here. It says adjust the positioning knob, that's this one, so that the threaded rod is just flush with the knob. In other words, that is the threaded rod that goes all the way through there. And if you adjust it towards just flush with this knob, he says that, in other words, it means just before this rod would start to poke out the end if you retracted the pusher any further back into the frame. So I've got it towards just flush. I mean, right there is what it looks like. It's just flush. It's not poking out. It's not sinking in. This threaded rod is just flush with this push knob here. Now it says if you have to remove any of the back springs, go ahead and do that. We've already done that. And consider getting some stronger springs. I'm not really going to worry about that here. It says don't install the back box just yet. This was a very handy one. Number 5 says decide what brand of strings you want to use for a long time. I think these are Ernie Ball Cobalts. I think what I've got in stock right now is one or two more packages of Ernie Balls, if I'm not mistaken. I think I've got one extra pack of Cobalts. If not, then I've got some Jim Dunlop strings, which I like those a lot as well. Because he says decide what brand of strings you want to use for a long time. If you change the sizes or even the brand or model name of your strings, because metal compositions vary amongst manufacturers, the tension required to hold the trim in a certain position will change, as will the intonation of your guitar, and you'll have to do all the following steps again. So choose a brand or model of string and stick with it, okay? And you can just read the rest of these instructions for yourself. There's a lot of them actually. His whole session here has got about, I don't know, 13 or so instructions. And I am now on number 6. So I'm going to get on into this and see what we can do to try this to work. Decide where you want the rest position of your trim to be once this is all done. I've got it set to where I want it to be, which is with Ibanez RG4EX1, I think is what it is. It may be RG3 Wizard 2 neck. I always get it mixed up. But with this particular tremolo system, what you want to see is there's going to be an angle, a sloping angle on the top of this. But right here is what you go by. You go by these right here. They need to be straight parallel with the body, as well as this needs to be parallel with the body. Okay? So that's what you want to happen, and your action will be depending on your style of playing. Install the whammy bar. Look at the whole thing from the side to make sure that you know where you want the trim to float. Loosen the springs by unscrewing the spring claw screws a bit. Also tighten some of your wound strings a little until the tremolo is pulled forward of this rest position. So I think he's saying loosen the screws and tighten the string so that this can be pulled forward a little bit. Okay, so yeah, that's what he's saying, is loosen the screws in the back a bit. So we're going to do that. Let's flip this over real quick. I'm going to loosen these screws. I hope this works because I spent a lot of time trying to get this working. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to loosen these screws just a little bit. I'm going to go backwards. Just in case, what I want to do, I'm going to use this Velcro as my guide here. See that Velcro? Well, that block is lined pretty much up with that Velcro, just a little bit to the front of the Velcro, so I'm going to use that as my guide. So I'm just going to go ahead and loosen this up. So loosen these. Matter of fact, I'm going to need to, if I'm going to tighten the strings, then I'm going to need to loosen the actual locking nut up here, so that I can tighten the strings with this instead of using my fine tuners down there. Let me go ahead and do that, and let me double check before I go through all this mess that is what in fact it says. Loosen the springs by unscrewing the spring claw screws a bit, and also tighten some of your wound strings a little till the tremolo is pulled well forward of this rest position. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to tighten some of these wound strings up. So let's just do D. Make sure what I'm in tune here, how close it is. It's a D sharp, so I'm good. I'll give it a turn on that one, turn on the G, turn on the A, full turn on the E, and it says the wound string, so that is the G. That's actually not the G. I'm going to turn the G back down a full turn because he's saying the wound string, so that is the, for electric guitar in this particular string set, that's the E, the A, and the D here. Okay, so that is done. Now it says find a block, chunk of wood, roll of coins, stack of playing cards. Actually, playing cards will be perfect for this, since you can adjust the thickness by adding and removing individual cards. I don't have a stack of playing cards, but I do have some business cards. And so it says to find that. This is a big long thing of instructions here, so I'm just going to pause this and come back when I've done what it says to do. Okay guys, so here's where we're at so far. When you loosen the springs and you tighten the strings, it pulls that tremolo forward of rest. And the more I read on this, it was kind of confusing, but I had to go down and scroll down and kind of read some more of that. Step 7 talks about blocking the trim off. Well, it's trying to tell you not to block it off where it is now, well forward of rest position, but block it off where it needs to be once you're in rest position. So for example, I've used some business cards trying to get them just right, and I've wanted them to get in that rest position that I want, that straight on resting Floyd-Rose for an edge 2 or edge 3, whichever bridge this is. So I've got it blocked off to that, even though my screws now are too loose to support that weight. These screws are too loose. What I can already see that I'm going to need to do is notice how I lay this down? It moves the block, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to have to use my little pick holder system here. So let me go ahead and set that up. Okay, so you want to block it off where it's going to be in rest position, alright? It says, now let's examine where we're at. And this is at the end of step 7 here on these instructions that I'll leave a link to in the bottom. It says the strings are not yet at their proper pitch because we've tuned them up. The springs are set to loose. We've just loosened those on the last step. The block is keeping the tremolo from pitching any further forward from our desired rest position. So that's where we need to be, is our desired rest position when we block this off. Step 8 is tune the strings up to full pitch, and if they're new strings, probably let them sit for a day as they stretch and you retune them up to pitch. At this point, the trim is in its desired rest position and the strings are up to pitch. When I tune this, they're going to be up to pitch. The only problem now is that the springs are too loose because we've loosened them, and so our spacer block is required to hold the trim in place. So we just need to get the springs to start bearing all of the load, okay? Now I have a feeling that he's telling me to do all the stuff that I've already done. I'm not sure, when I set this thing up. I don't know. I'm just going to do what he says to do here. So I'm going to tune these up to pitch, and we'll see what happens when these are up to pitch, okay? Then we'll go from there. Alright, now everything is back in tune. I'm going to flip this thing back over. Still blocked off. Make sure that the back end of this is sitting on here, not affecting the whammy bar here at all. Now the next step, I haven't touched the locking mechanism. It didn't say anything about the locking nut. I haven't touched the locking nut at all. So now it says, this is step number 9, we're going to gradually tighten these screws for the spring claw to stretch the springs, okay? As you do this, test how easy it is to wiggle the block. As you get closer and closer, the spacer block should get easier and easier to wiggle until it isn't being pressed on by the trim block at all. It either falls out or you can easily slip it out. This is the setup process, and I've already had the setup process done, if I'm not mistaken. I already had it where I wanted it, so I think I'm going through all this for nothing. But anyway, I'm going to do it exactly as he says to do it here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to tighten these screws until this is easy to pull out, and we'll see where we are after that. Okay guys, here we have the entire Tremolo system set up. This was basically for me a waste of time because I'd already done this before doing all this. So if you've got your Floyd-Rose set up in tune, the springs are balanced evenly with the string tension, then you're good to go, in my opinion, from step 10 onwards. Because here's what it says. At this point, this is the end of step 9 here on the instructions. At this point, the trim is at the right rest position. The strings are very close to proper pitch. If it's a little high, then loosen the springs just a smidge. And the springs are holding this on their own. Perfect. So that's where I'm at this point. I could have just went from step number 10 and continued on. But for those of you that wonder how to set a Floyd-Rose up, this would be a good way to learn that. But if you already know that, then begin at step 10. Now, install the back box in a position so that the felt, that's the felt tip, install it so that it almost touches the trim block. When I say almost, I mean a 1/16 of an inch or a couple millimeters is fine. Closer is probably better, but don't worry too much about getting it within the width of a human hair or anything. So what I'm probably going to do is use 2 of these business cards that I used to block that off. And that's going to be a good little separator right there. Maybe even 1. But that'll be right close to where it needs to be. Okay. It says you should drill a little pilot hole for the screws. Do not drill all the way through and out to the front of your guitar. That's very important. Hold one of the screws up to the drill bit you're going to use. Put a piece of tape on the drill to let you know how deep to go. You can use masking tape to go around the drill bit so that you can kind of match the length of the screws that's included in this back box. The screws that go with it that are installed right here and right here. Okay, so these screws here that are in the little package, hold the drill bit up to that and put a piece of tape around that drill bit, and that way you'll know how deep to go. Okay, so that kind of marks it off. You may have to drive out one of the screws at an angle. That's fine. Just make sure that the back box is securely fastened and doesn't wiggle when you push or pull on it. So I'm going to pause this and we'll see what happens, and I'll get back with you when it's installed here. Okay guys, here's what I've done so far. I've taken the drill and I've taken the screw that's going to be in the back box and put it up against my drill bit here. Measure the length of it and then tape the drill off so I know where I need to stop when I'm drilling this thing, okay? So that's what it looks like. Focus that in. So there's the screw, there's the drill bit. I've masked that off so I know not to go any deeper than my tape here. Now the tricky part is trying to get this lined up to where it is not touching but very close to touching. And I tried using some business cards for that, but it just doesn't want to work because I move the business card and it pushes the back box when that happens. So I'm just going to have to get it the best I can. It's touching here, and I want to get it right in the middle of these springs too. So right about there. So it's barely touching, almost touching that is, and I need to get it, and it's very slick. This right here, finish, is very slick in here, so I've really got to pay attention to what I'm doing. Through very quickly. Hopefully that didn't go out the other side. That would be bad. Surely it didn't. No, I think it did that because it's right close to where this hole for the pickup is. More than likely, that's what happened. It's on the other side of the pickup. Hopefully it didn't damage the pickup. Let's hope that it didn't. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. So, by the way, for tightening this screw, these screws up, I meant to mention this earlier and I forgot. The business cards were in the way. So what I had to do is take a bit so that I could have a smaller area here. And I put some vice grips on there. And I just went inside the screws and just started twisting them like that, because I couldn't fit my huge screwdriver in there for that. So, go ahead and take that apart now. And so my drill bit is done for now. I'm going to need it again just a little bit to install the other part of this back box. Now some people say you can take this whole thing apart and not lose everything, but then you got to screw it down to get the bits right, and then you got to take it back out. But another guy said all you really need to do is take and tighten this spring tension all the way. That way you can actually get to that little screw hole there on the other side. So I'm going to try it that way, then just back it off as I need to. First of all, one thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put this back plate back on my springs here so that I can get that out of the way. Not to fool with it no more. Actually, the spring here is in the screw hole that this was supposed to go on. So I still might be able to do one of them. I don't know. It's not going to... I don't think it's going to work like that. I guess I just have to leave this back plate off and hope that the springs don't come out. Usually they don't typically do. That's actually in one of the screw holes, so I can't do anything about that. But it's not a big deal, so I'll just keep these in some spare parts. I'm just going to go ahead and screw in the back box where I made this hole in the first place. I'm running all kinds of problems here, because now that little piece of wood is so thin that it went all the way through, and the screw itself is stripped. So it will not screw at all, it will not hold down at all. So I'm going to have to put some toothpicks in there, do something to try to get that to work. This is actually, this drill bit looked like it was probably bigger than what I need it to be. I think that's the problem. See that drill bit? It's much wider than the screw. The drill bit is a 7/64 of an inch, and it's still bigger than this screw needed to be. So I messed up there. So what I will have to do is stick a bunch of toothpicks in there or something, break them off, and try to screw that in there again. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off and see what I can do to fix this. Alright guys, what I've decided to do is I've given it some thought, and it doesn't really say it has to be in the center. That's where I drill the hole. So I'm actually going to take it and move it up or down. Actually, I may move it down to help compensate for the two springs here, making another spring there. So I'm probably going to do that, try to get it as centered as I can, but not exactly the same. And what I've done is I went ahead also and tightened this spring tension screw here, this knurled screw, and that way I can get easily to this screw here. Let's go ahead and install that back screw. I'm not going to worry about pre-drilling any holes because that was a disaster last time. What I am going to do is go ahead and try to make it line up to where it's not rattling like that whenever the springs are tightening. Try to get as close to the middle as possible without drilling into that other hole, because we don't want the wood to be weak. There we go. I'm going to back it out a little bit, screw in a little bit more, back it out a little bit, screw in a little bit more. In effect, that's going to give me those pre-drilled holes that I need. There we go. I'm going to tighten that, line that up. Good. We've got it to where it's almost, but not all the way touching that tremolo block there. As far as the felt goes. Now, good. That's one less problem. Now we take this other screw, and we are going to take and screw on the other side where I've removed that spring, and it should screw straight down there. And it looks like it does. Screw a little bit, back it out. Screw a little bit, back it out. You want this to be straight as well, alright? Make sure you line it up before you start screwing these screws up, to where there's no more movement in the back box itself. Bingo. Now, the back box is not moving up and down. Anything else, it looks very straight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the tension on this spring. And I'm not sure if I can zoom in on that or not. There we go. Alright, so let's zoom in on that. This spring here is too tight now, so I'm just going to adjust it back the other way, the opposite way of what I had it, so that it can travel downwards towards this direction. We're going to just go ahead and try that. It's kind of hard to remember which way it went to loosen and to tighten. And the good thing is the knob is burled. There, I'm just going to get it back to where it was, which is all the way right. When you're facing this way back, turn it right and it loosens the spring tension. Okay, now this is the one that controls the actual pole here. And what it says next on the instructions, and I am so glad that that worked because I was really not wanting to look forward to trying to figure out how to fill that hole and everything. Now it says position the pusher properly. If it's extended too far, you will see the back box move when you pitch the tremolo forward, that is dive the string. So what that means, you want it to be barely touching like it said. See, the felt is almost touching. You can see the gap there. It's almost touching. Not quite. There's a little gap. So what you want to happen is when you dive bomb this thing, you don't want the pusher to move at all. You want it to be stable. And when you go the other direction, when you take and floated the tremolo this way, in other words, you take and pull up on the bar, if you press on the back and you rest your palm there, it's too far back if they go up and pitch very much at all. You want this to support the tremolo bar, the tremolo block, whenever you're resting your palm. That's a big thing with Floyd-Roses. When you rest your palm on the bridge, the strings are sharp, the strings are they get too sharp or whatever, and you want that to be compensated with this. In other words, here it says we want the back box to not be a part of the equation when you're rocking your tremolo forward, because it's not going to do anything. We don't want it to do anything when your tremolo goes forward. But when your tremolo goes back, even the slightest movement, we want it to be resisting even the slightest movement. Okay, it says take some time getting this just right because it really affects how things will turn out. Also, it helps to use a chromatic tuner to see just how much your strings are going up when you rest your palm on the trim, which is a very good tip. You'll probably never get it perfect. If you can get it so that you can't hear any rise and pitch, then you're there. Okay, so I'm going to pause this and try to work on that, and then we'll come back and hopefully finish this thing up. Okay guys, now this is where it's going to get a little tricky. I adjusted the outer spring here to where it would be resting against this, so that when I pushed it forward, that I don't want to hear any sound. Now I haven't had that happen yet because this actually doesn't stay put like I hoped it would when I loosen it. Now I'm having to use my trusty clamps again. What I'm doing is I'm taking the clamp on the outside of this thing here, pushing it away from you, which will in fact will push this towards the block here. If I loosen that space, notice that this actually moves. It moved it back. So it's not staying put. Hopefully when I tighten the springs up like it says to do next, this will actually push this forward and this will kind of stop it in its tracks. I really hope that's what this thing is supposed to do. Hopefully it works, because now we're going to actually be adjusting the inner spring according to these instructions. So it says the next step is to start tightening the screws for the spring claw some more. Okay, now I don't know how much some more is. This is going to cause the springs to be applying more force than is needed, but the back box will be keeping the tremolo from moving. This extra force will only come into play when you try to bend a string or rock the trim forward. The easiest way I've found to set this right is to play some string while you bend another. Play a string like the high E while you bend the B string, as much as you anticipate ever needing to bend. You don't play the bent string. The bend is just to add tension on the trim. Play an unbent string and bend an unplayed string. In other words, you want to try to equalize it so that when you're bending, it doesn't get the other strings out of tune. So let's tighten some of these up a little bit. I'm going to give it one, about 2 turns. 1, 2. The back box is hopefully going to keep this from moving forward. Okay. Now this is actually going to set it to where hopefully the bent strings won't be causing the other strings to lower in tuning. And this will help also if you break a string. Okay. So let's see what happens here. At first you'll hear the plate string fall in pitch, so you tighten the screws and try again. So in other words, let's try this. We're going to go ahead and bend a string here. Usually I like to go with the D. Okay, so I'm actually going to touch that string. So I'm going to try to do the E and then bend the B string. Okay, so I'm hearing it. Hearing it go down, so I'm actually going to tighten the claws a little bit more. At first you'll hear the plate string fall in pitch, so tighten the screws in the spring claw and try again. Keep doing this until the unbent plate string doesn't fall in pitch as you bend. Keep in mind, however, that as you're tightening the springs, the back box might start moving as the increase in spring tension overcomes the preload of the back box's spring. If this happens, preload this back box spring some more. So if this starts moving, increase the tension on the springs. So let's see what happens here. Let's try this. Now we're actually loading the tremolo arm up. I'm going to try doing this again. Same deal. I'm going to bend the B and listen for the E. Still doing it. So let's try tightening the springs up a little bit more. And this is very low in tension. I may actually tighten that up anyway. Yeah, it's starting to move. So let's go ahead and tighten this up and load that preload string here. Now to tighten this, I'm going to move it away from me because it's going the opposite direction from the other one. There we go. Preload that a little bit more so it actually forces this back where it needs to be. Okay. Now, before I tighten the screws again, let's see if this is going to help the tuning here. Okay, so it's still doing it. Let's work on it some more. This is why you want to stick with one string gauge and one string brand, because you're going to have to do this all over again if you don't. It's getting a lot better. We're going to keep going. Now this is a classic double stop bend. I'm going to go ahead and show you what I'm doing here. Now this is a good way to do this. Here's what I was doing, bending the B string and hitting the E string. And you can still hear it varying there. And hitting the low E string. Still doing that, but check this out. Now if I do that and hit the B string and just bend the G, it's actually holding up pretty well. That was not doing that before on this Ibanez. I usually had to go. I had to come back down and then pre-bend that. Doing really well, not hardly any problems there. So I think I am satisfied with this. I'm going to leave that alone for now. If anything, probably do a couple more tightenings on the preload knob here. 1, 2, 3 for good measure, and we're going to call it done. For me, that's a little too far up, but I probably need tighter strings. That's a little too far up in the cavity there. You usually want about 1 inch from what I've heard. But this is good. This is what I want. It's stable now, so let's see what it's going to sound like after doing a whammy bar in here. I should be able to put my hand on the actual tremolo without having to worry about any change in tuning. It's actually working good. What I'm trying to show you is my hand going on the palm of this. Now before that would have all kinds of tuning problems, so now it doesn't. So let's see what we sound like. Obviously Looks like it may have caused the tuning to go up a bit, so yeah, that's up quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and undo the tuning keys, retune this with this, lock it back down, see where we're at from there, and probably call it quits. So I'll be back shortly. Alright guys, I am back finally. Hopefully we are done. The back box is installed. We have liftoff. We're in tune. Very little to any movement here. Now the Tremolo arm is quite a bit tighter since I tightened the springs. So what I may do is reduce the height of the Tremolo arm if I'm going to keep it this way. Still in good tune. Because as it comes back, it's also supposed to stay snug against that. The back box is supposed to keep it kind of like a 0 point position. Now I just may have messed that up because let's see what it sounds like. Now I don't know what that technically did to the back box here. It's supposed to allow it to go back, but the spring is supposed to push it back to its normal setting here, which looks like it will go back to its normal setting after you lift back up on this. So if I go back at all, then I have to come forward again to get it back in tune. So I'm just going to have to work on it because it seems like I'm going to need to loosen these springs a little bit because it's not exactly as straight as I like it to be. It almost looks like the bridge is going down into the cavity more than I'd like for it to. So I'm going to have to loosen them springs a little bit. I'll just keep working with it. But for now, it's good enough for me. Okay, so hopefully that helped anybody that was looking to install a back box. Obviously, there's probably easier ways to do it. The whole setup part, if you're set up, then just continue on with number 10 in the instructions, because from there, that's really all you'll really need to worry about. So from right now, I'm signing off. I may tweak with this a little bit more, but that's pretty much it for getting this thing finally installed on my Ibanez RG4EX1. And hopefully it'll have some good stuff later on. Maybe it'll start going back to where it needs to be. We'll see what happens. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll talk to you later, and God bless.